I joined the Navy right after high school. I was active duty 62 through 64, so that's over 50 years ago, and I was a radarman. I worked in Combat Information Center, and the radar I worked with was the NTDS, Navy Tactical Display System, which was kind of the forerunner of the approach control radar that they use at the airports now. It's all computer generated and automatic tracking and stuff. Very interesting. And I'd sit in front of a radar scope with a cup of coffee in one hand and a cigarette in the other, and stand by watches. And that coffee, Navy coffee, if anybody knows Navy coffee, it's enough to float a spoon. So when you're getting ready to go off watch, you didn't drink much of that coffee, you'd never be able to go to sleep. I stood some of my watches down in CIC, and then my battle station was up on the bridge, so I was able to see a lot of things that were going on. During that time, at the Cold War, when we were operating with the fleet, we had a lot of problems with the Russian fishing trawlers wanting to go in between our ships and always listening out there. But they call them fishing trawlers, but the radar or the radio masts they had on there, they were strictly listening to our radars, our conversations, our frequencies, and just gathering intelligence. I've seen a lot of the world, Italy, France, Spain, Sicily, Sardinia, Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and of course St. Thomas and the Virgin Islands. We were in Naples, went up and saw Pompeii, which is very interesting. I've been to Tripoli, Libya, Willis Air Force Base. We pulled the ship in the dock there for a visit and to show a force. And Tripoli, Libya is just like walking back in time. I mean, just old buildings, sand, wind. It just felt like you're walking back in time. They weren't modern, up to date. They were really old school. Did some shopping there, bought a couple of Gershon pipes and stuff, but it's just very interesting. Some of the places that you go, you see the different cultures. And I've been to Istanbul, Turkey. Here again, it's very, very an old school town. I mean, the people, the way they think of things, nothing modern really thinking. Everything is based on how they were raised, how they were taught in school, and they have a different outlook on life. I was in the Mediterranean when Kennedy was assassinated, and we were in the Philadelphia Naval Yard during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And so there were some interesting times there. When Kennedy was assassinated, we were at battle stations for about 48 hours straight. Some scary times. And then during the missile crisis, people don't really realize how close we came to invading Cuba. I mean, everything was set in place. All it took was the president's word to say go. And they would have been scrambling over there. I was stationed aboard the USS Long Beach, which was the nation's first nuclear-powered guided missile cruiser. Matter of fact, it was the first nuclear-powered surface combatant ship that the United States built. We were one of a kind. I served with the 2nd Fleet and the 6th Fleet. It was commissioned in, I think, 1961. And it was all air-conditioned, filtered fresh air, so it was comfortable in there. The berthing compartments, the bunks, weren't these pipe things, canvas. They were actual bunks in there, and we had a fresh air supply in each of the bunk spaces and a nice reading light, and had real nice lockers for our personal stuff. But like I say, it was a guided missile cruiser. We had 2 Terrier missile mounts on the front of the ship, and we had a Terrier missile mount on the rear of the ship. Kind of a funny story with the missile firings. If a missile misfired or didn't fire, they'd turn the missile launcher off to the side of the ship, and there was a hydraulic ram coming up out of the deck that actually gave the missile a boot in the butt, knocked it off the rails and over the side of the ship, which was kind of funny to see. All that sophistication, and in case things go wrong, give it a boot in the ass. They have some slides of storm at sea, and you see that our ship was 721 feet long. So you get into rough water where you're actually riding the troughs. The bow of the ship would come up like this and then slam down. The whole nose of the ship be buried in the sea, in the water. And then as it's slowly coming up, you'd see the water parting. It actually had the bow of the ship would break the water, but also where the superstructure met the main deck was another breakwater. So that water would come from the front of the ship, over the front of the ship, hit that second breakwater where the bridge and upper decks were, and then splash off to either side of the ship. So it'd be a lot of this up and down and up and down. But it was a pretty stable platform in the rougher water, and we sure loved that ship. At one time, when we were in the Mediterranean, we actually had a drag race with the Enterprise from a standing start, and then they poured the coals to it. And we took off and left the Enterprise in back. All you saw was a shadow at the skyline. But as we got going, that thing kept on creeping closer and closer and closer, and to see a big carrier like that coming at you and passing you, it was something to see. Just a lot of good memories, a lot of funny things. It was a pretty good 2 years on board, but you know, kind of hindsight, you think back on those times, you know, it wasn't so bad at all. But well, you live and you learn. It's still a good thing.